I now request our Dean, Professor Amitabh Mattu, to take over and conduct.
Before I begin the formal proceedings, could I request more students to be allowed in, as many as possible within this limits of this auditorium? Yeah. Good afternoon, Namaskar, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya. The Honorable External Affairs Minister, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shanti Shri Dulpudi Pandit, faculty, staff, and students of Jawaharlal Nehru University, and especially the great School of International Studies, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In October 1955, the then Vice President, Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, inaugurated the Indian School of International Studies, barely a decade after the country's independence, as an institution devoted to, and I quote, the objective study of international affairs and India's place in it. In 1969, the Indian School of International Studies became one of the founding schools of JNU, the School of International Studies, as we know it today, which blazed the trail for the teaching and research of international relations in this country and beyond. Today, ladies and gentlemen, as we begin the 70th year of the founding of the School of International Studies, it's the greatest honor to invite our most distinguished alumnus in the world of international relations to inaugurate our celebrations through our flagship program, the Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lectures. There is no greater testimony to our scholarship and our impact on public policy than Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. As anyone who even cursorily follows international relations knows, when Dr. Jaishankar speaks, the world listens. Today he will speak on Bharat and the world will be hearing him attentively. He speaks for JNU, he speaks for India, he speaks for Bharat. A Bharat that has recaptured the imagination of the globe through its inner and external strengths, the strength of its foreign policy and diplomacy, and the power of the extraordinary vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. May I now request the Honorable Vice Chancellor, a distinguished alumnus of the School of International Studies, Professor Shanti Shri Pandit, to make her presidential remarks and to formally invite the Honorable Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, to deliver his address.
Good evening to all of you. Namaskar. Ellarkum vanakkam. Andaru Mahanubhavuliki na Shatakoti Vandanalu Namaskaralu. We have one of our most distinguished alumnus, Dr. S. Jaishankar, here, and I'm so happy that he has been able to come back to the university. And in the 70th year, sir, we would like MEA and the School of International Relations to come together in celebrating not only research but as well as scholarship. I welcome you all to Jawaharlal Nehru University, the university that is the #1 university in the country, and the university that believes where tradition meets modernity, continuity with change, myth with reality, as well as where we follow equality, equity with excellence, and integrity, inclusion with innovation. So welcome to JNU, and we are extraordinarily happy that Dr. Jaishankar, who has reimagined, redefined our foreign policy and connected it with our civilization state as well as our culture, to also making India one of the top, with the Prime Minister's vision of India becoming the 5th biggest economic power. And they will also be taking India to higher and greater lens. I'm sure most of you must have read his latest book called Why Bharat Matters. And in that, the New Delhi G20 summit not only showed the ability to shape the global agenda, but also we have become from rule takers to rule shapers thanks to leaders like Dr. Jaishankar. Sir, once again, I welcome you to Jawaharlal Nehru University and thank you for coming. Thank you all.
Vice Chancellor Professor Pandit, Dean Professor Mattu, dear friends, I'm truly delighted to be back in JNU and very privileged to be invited to deliver the Professor Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lecture. As you all know, he was the founder of the Indian Council of World Affairs, that is now closely associated with the Ministry of External Affairs, and where certainly students of my generation of JNU spent a lot of our time. He was also responsible for starting the Indian School of International Studies that became SIS in JNU, where I did my MPhil and PhD. So it is only appropriate that on this occasion I share thoughts with all of you on Bharat and the world. Let me start with my own understanding of what is Bharat. It actually has multiple symbolisms in different domains. Economically, we could be speaking about an Atmanirbhar Bharat that has a connotation of a certain resilience, a certain self-sufficiency, a contribution, or a talent that is expressing itself. Developmentally, today, when we speak about Bharat, it also implies a commitment to create an inclusive, just, and fair society where no one is left behind. And that is actually in many ways the true test of development. Politically, Bharat is a statement of independence. It is a declaration that India engages the world, that when India engages the world, it doesn't have to be done necessarily on terms that are set by others. Our objective in that engagement is to let our own personality and innate qualities come out. And then there is, of course, the cultural aspects of Bharat. Here we could be speaking about our thinking, our traditions, our heritage, and our practices. But moving beyond the descriptive to the analytical, where international relations is concerned, Bharat also means being a civilizational state rather than just a national polity. It suggests a larger responsibility and contribution, one that is expressed as a first responder, as a development partner, as a peacekeeper, a bridge builder, a global goods contributor, and an upholder of rules, norms, and law. It implies not only rebalancing in politics and economics, but in the cultural domain as well. It mandates the influencing of the international agenda and the shaping of global narratives. Not least, it means drawing on our own history and taking a long and deliberative view of the challenges that the world faces today. It requires us to be equally serious about the present, consolidating the achievements of the last decade while planning ahead for the quarter century of the Amrit Kal. Now, as you will all appreciate, it is but natural that a Bharat would approach the world from the perspectives of its own interests, worldview, sentiment, and culture. A crucial difference is that of not allowing our approach to be clouded by imported ideologies and global conformism. Instead, there is a self-assured analysis of how our national goals are best advanced, coupled with the experiences we share with others and the empathy that this generates. With that in mind, I put before you today 10 propositions that to my mind describe the current state of the world, and in each case, how Bharat would and should respond. So let us begin. First, there has been discernible, even if uneven, progress in economic and political rebalancing of the global order. The G20 has overtaken the G7, and many new groupings and mechanisms have come into being. The list of the top economies of the world has undergone change, and India itself has moved up 6 positions in the last decade. This change is real, but it is imperfect and it is incomplete. It will continue to unfold, but not always in a linear fashion. While many objective conditions have improved from India's perspective, the struggle for cultural rebalancing has only just begun. To be conducted on a global stage, it must first be progressed at the domestic one. This battle is on. Economically, Bharat's answer is in greater Atmanirbharta, and politically, a more authentic and rooted representation that will contest the propaganda which will favor the compliant and the discredited. Bharat will never shy away from questions, but equally, Bharat has the courage to question the questioners. Second, even as these trends unfold, we have been subjected to decadal shocks. There is a backlash against globalization and an assertion of identity and of autonomy. This is visible, for example, in the politics of the US and of the UK, and it continues to gather steam. It has been vastly aggravated by the trauma that COVID has inflicted on so many societies. And if you add to that the changes in Afghanistan, the fighting in Ukraine, the conflict in West Asia, each has its own lessons. Factor in as well the implications of sharpening big power competition. The world now looks more volatile and uncertain, demanding independent and confident thinking from us. We have seen that already when it came to our energy procurement choices. Bharat chose the interests of its domestic consumers by resisting external pressures. Similarly, by questioning widely prevalent globalization mantras, we stood up for our workforce, we stood up for our SMEs and industry against unfair competition. Third, in such a world, the calculus of national security has understandably become much more complicated. Traditional methods of competing and pressurizing are buttressed by new tools of influence and disruption. Here too, Bharat has pushed back with determination and fortitude. When we were challenged on the LAC with China in the midst of COVID, our rapid and effective counter deployments were the appropriate answer. Not just that, by seeking to rectify the long neglect of the border infrastructure, we have made the defense of the nation much more effective. On the larger stage, when it came to the Indo-Pacific, we held firmly to our decision to establish and take forward the Quad. On the Western Front, the long-standing challenge of cross-border terrorism now elicits more befitting responses. Believe me, Uri and Balakot send their own message. Fourth, economic security is no less demanding, is no less important. The world today confronts the reality of massive over-concentrations created by misplaced globalization. The resulting leveraging, the opaqueness and the distortions are key concerns not only of the international economy, but to global security as well. Unlike the past, Bharat does not accept that openness to the world justifies undermining level playing fields at home. On the contrary, it now seeks to build the deep national strengths where technology progress rests on the foundation of better manufacturing. Our goal is to participate in resilient and reliable global supply chains, especially when it comes to the industries of the future. The digital era, similarly, puts a premium on trust and transparency. There are good reasons why we have been prudent about certain games and apps in recent years. The compulsions of a more intensive decade also require us to prepare more seriously for a global workplace. Upgrading our skills, promoting talent and innovation, making it easier to do business, and supporting national products are all facets of the transformation underway. At the same time, must also be highlighted in public forums. The pressure for change is manifest and yet requires enormous effort to be brought to a tangible conclusion. In the meanwhile, our interests are best served by working with the like-minded and the convergent. In this decade alone, we have joined almost 40 different plurilateral groupings in different domains. For the foreseeable future, that apparently is the way forward. Eighth, even as the world changes, we must be cognizant of the reality that the old order coexists with the emerging trends. Managing a long twilight will be a very complex responsibility. And yet, it must be one undertaken with the requisite understanding and the dexterity. Bharat perceives the distinction between being non-West and anti-West. It is not our interest that in trading places we end up with a more adverse situation. Finding common ground, even while asserting our own identity, is therefore an essential requirement. Ninth, a world of new balances is coming into being that features a repositioning of the US and the rise of China, and amongst other developments. It is also one of sharper East-West polarization, currently focused on Ukraine, but not necessarily limited to it. At the same time, there is a deeper North-South divide revolving around concerns of development, debt, resources, and equity. We faced the entirety of these complications during our presidency of the G20. In response, we were not only able to achieve consensus, but also produced impactful outcomes on key issues. In doing so against such daunting odds, we were able to demonstrate that the quest to be a Vishwamitra has actually struck a chord with the international community. And finally, 10th, the global debate usually posits nationalism and internationalism as binary choices. Perhaps these are conclusions driven from the experiences of others. Bharat's story is very different. It is one of rejuvenation and resurgence at home, but more contribution and responsibilities abroad. Vaccine Maitri, International Solar Alliance, and a development partnership in 78 nations are proof of our commitment. So, what does all this mean in practical terms when it comes to policy choices? Let's start with a better appreciation of our own history. Policy choices. As we have seen in the last decade, start with a better appreciation of our own history. Policy choices. As we have seen in the last decade, start with a better appreciation of our own. We can build on shared interests and attributes. Where the extended neighborhoods, whether it is in Southeast Asia, where we have the Act East policy, or the Gulf, where we have Link West, or the Connect Central Asia, we are reviving long-established linkages and associations. This is creating the basis for initiatives like the IMEC corridor and the I2U2. In the opposite direction, towards the east, a stronger recollection of our maritime history is driving the growth of the Quad and the exploration of the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor. When it comes to tradition, let us not forget that there is a long one when it comes to statecraft in India. These include basic principles of how to engage neighbors and when and in what manner to incentivize and to disincentivize. Unfortunately, the compulsions of vote banks and a rosy-eyed view emanating from ideological predilections led to continuous misreading of some of our neighbors. Today, a more realistic approach that draws on experience ensures that our national security is served much better. The global image of all nations is significantly shaped by their culture. If we are defensive about ours, this naturally extrapolates into how we project ourselves, or indeed how others see us. It is the transformations underway at home that has enabled us to take initiatives such as the International Day of Yoga, the propagation of Ayurveda, or the advocacy of millets. In fact, this very confidence also makes the requests of our communities abroad, including for places of worship, more tenable. International cooperation may be a relatively modern concept, but Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has existed as an outlook for centuries. Such beliefs have led us to offer vaccines to almost 100 nations while we were still in the midst of vaccinating our own. Believe me, that memory will stay with them for a long time. It is also the driver of more than 600 development projects spread across multiple geographies that have been executed more efficiently due to our improved capacities. In fact, our progress at home has become key to conversations abroad, given that so many partners seek to profit from our example. If we are today a more people-centric polity, that too is very visibly reflected in our foreign policy actions. When COVID happened, our Vande Bharat mission brought back home millions of Indians stranded abroad. When conflicts took place in Ukraine, Sudan, or Israel, our special operations that also involved military assets ensured the safe return of our nationals. Even as a routine, the extensive use of Indian Community Welfare Fund ensures that Indians in need are never abandoned. And on the home front, as some of you may have personally experienced, obtaining passports has become so much easier. The message to our citizens is very clear: we have your back even when you go abroad. Bharat is understandably the source of greater ideas and initiatives. The world has seen that from a range of issues, whether it is solar energy and disaster resilience, to sustainable lifestyle, counter-terrorism, and oceanic welfare. If there is a single example of what has changed, it could be seen in the handling of our G20 presidency. By organizing it over 60 cities, we were able to project our enormous diversity to the world. We took up causes which were just and fair, amplifying the voice of the Global South and ensuring the entry of the African Union into the G20. The key outcomes: SDG Action Plan, Digital Public Infrastructure, Green Development Pact, the reform of international financial institutions, the principles of the LIFE initiative or women-led development. All these together brought the international agenda back on track, successfully harmonizing East-West divergences and bridging the North-South divide demonstrated that a Vishwamitra can indeed make a difference. Today, a civilizational state is once again making its presence felt in the Committee of Nations. It brings to bear its particular experiences, outlook, and approach. to world affairs. This will have a stabilizing impact on an order that is currently marked by volatility and uncertainty. It will certainly help define the emergence of multipolarity. The international community can see that Bharat means confidence, it means equity, it means responsibility, and it means contribution. Our rise is being welcomed by many, and we must live up to global expectations as we should do to domestic ones in the Amrit Kaal. Thank you for your attention.
The Honourable Minister has very graciously agreed to take questions, but I would first like the students from the School of International Studies to ask questions, but I also wanted to convey the profound gratitude of one of our colleagues, Professor Hariram Mishra, who lost his daughter in an accident in Belgium, and he is deeply grateful by the manner in which your office, sir, and the embassy in Belgium acted with speed, and he wants that investigation be fully carried out. Thank you, sir, on his behalf. Any students, please show your hands. We have a couple of rowing. Yes, from JNU IR Society. Yes, please go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sanjeet, a PhD candidate at SIS. I work on Swatantra Party's foreign policy. My question for Minister is that in the first 2 decades of the 21st century, India saw a rising China and consolidating Russia as a key partner in reforming the global governance institutions in anticipation of the coming multipolarity. However, how do Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's border clashes change New Delhi's calculus with regard to this informal RIC consensus on reforming multilateralism? Thank you.
2 or 3 questions? Or? Three at a time. So, I want a gender balance. Bharat, you're not a student right now.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, sir, for your insightful discourse. As you have spoken time and again, that the trends of globalization have been held hostage to some whims and fancies of self-appointed chaudharis, as you had rightly pointed out. Now, how do you see the self-appointed chaudharis reacting to India's rise, and as India carves out its own path in the globalized sphere? I'm Shorojyoti Roy Chaudhary, sir. I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for West Asian Studies.
One of our women students, girl students, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello. Good evening, sir. We are extremely overwhelmed here to have you with us. I'm Ashita Shankarshan and I am from MEPISM second year. And we would like to know more about your experiences in JNU, sir. We would like to hear more, some of the interesting anecdotes that you experienced here, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
The last question.
Good evening,
Last
sir.
question is a particularly hard one.
Good evening, sir. Shreya Nautiyal this side.
No, after the next
Let me
round.
deal with these 3.
Next round.
Yeah. So, I'll start with the first one. The China, Russia, how did we start? How did the world look 20 years ago? And where are we today? Look, 20 years ago when BRICS started, the way the global landscape was, it was still very dominated by the end of the Cold War. The Western countries had a sense of triumph. They essentially operated the global system like they owned it. what it did, therefore, was to leave out a number of players who felt that they should have greater influence or say in how the world worked. And in a sense, that was part of the reason how countries like Russia, India, China, Brazil, there were some 2005, 2012. The Chinese have created a new situation on the border because our only response at that time was to counter-deploy in strength on the line of actual control. Now, has this affected the cooperation which we had in the multilateral side, in the plurilateral side? I think it's natural that it would have an impact because you can't have a sort of a standoff at the border which is very militarized and very tense, and then say, let's go to the next room and work together. I mean, to some extent you can if there are very transactional issues out there. But as a general supposition, it makes, working together that much harder. So I think we have to, international relations is not a static business. We continuously move with times. So it's a little bit like your phone, you have to keep refreshing it. So I think after the sort of last set of updates today, we have to see how best we can forge ahead. Now, in the meanwhile, other things have also happened. I mean, the position of the United States has changed. This was a country previously which was not, particularly keen to work outside its alliance construct. That has given way to much greater openness because the United States realizes today that it is overstretched. So, in a sense today, we have more compulsions, but we also have many more options. So, responding, I would say, to the totality of things, you're getting today a very different architecture come into play where India is concerned. So the sense of multipolarity, to have multi-vector relationships at the same time, this is much more possible, it is much more effective in 2024 than say it would have been 20 years ago. Trends of globalization, what the same time people say. This is much more possible. That is a constant struggle. Because as I said, we are seeing economic rebalancing. A country like India today has become 5th largest economy, probably go up in the order. Some of it is expressed as political rebalancing. We can see that too. But there are many other conversations which go on. There are cultural conversations, there are ideological conversations. There are, in different domains, there are ways of asserting hegemony and resisting it. And a lot of it we see, in that kind of, the ratings, the media coverage, the judgment passing. These are all sort of part of the toolkit, you can say. And the fact is, it's a competitive world. We have to acknowledge that it exists. We have to recognize it. We have to contest it. And quite frankly, that's what we are doing. JNU anecdotes. That's a difficult one. I mean, I can only say I came in '73, and at that time all the studies was in the old JNU campus. I moved into the first hostel which was then open, which was Kaveri. And for me, still, therefore, the old campus and that Kaveri, Periyar, Godavari complex is for me still the heart. You'll mention why, you'll ask yourself why Godavari. And the answer is I met my first wife. She was also studying there, so we were students together. It has a lot of happy memories.
Second round of questions. The lady student there at the corner. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Shreya this side from School of International Studies. My question is that how can Bharat as a nation, as you mentioned, that it'll since there's a divide now, so how will it navigate its way by distinguishing between being non-West and being anti-West, especially and what will be its stance in the future with respect to the ongoing geopolitical tensions that we're witnessing today? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, get it.
Hello, sir. My name is Bharat. I'm a student of Chinese Studies. I'm a PhD scholar of Chinese Studies, JNU. Sir, my question is, in what fundamental ways is the world order which you envision for Bharat different from Western liberal order? If not, then is our sense of civilization permanently dominated by Western civilizational values, something which Gandhi questioned in the Hind Swaraj? Thank you.
Yes. Go ahead.
Am I audible? Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Ishita. I'm a first year student at SIS. So my question is that a part of India's rise in the world is also a diplomatic presence, and we do have a shortage of diplomats, especially compared to other countries. So what are we doing to improve that, or what can be done to make sure that the quantity improves but the quality is also not compromised? Thank you, sir.
The first question. Look, we are a liberal democracy. We are a market economy. We are an incredibly plural society. I would say perhaps one of the most pluralistic I have seen in all my travels around the world. So in many ways, if you look at our societal attributes, they are not in discordance with the Western world, because these are, many of them, qualities which the Western world prizes, and often I think they need to be reminded that each of these qualities we are actually performing better than them. But that's a different matter. Now, the problem for us is, while we share many of these attributes, the world order is still one, you can say, broadly engineered after the Second World War, but which carried all the advantages of the imperialism, the period of imperialism and colonialism before that. And so the dice is loaded in many, many ways in favor of Western countries. And as a rising power, often, we want space, we want a say, we want more rights, we want, we need to build more capabilities. So at one level, you agree with them on many things, but at another level, you have to fight and contest and argue and push in order to get that space and that place. So there's a duality. I mean, life is not a linear, it's not a one-dimensional exercise. And actually, we Indians are very good at managing multiple identities and multiple realities. So our effort today, because here's the problem. If we get drawn into a plain and simple anti-West position, we actually may end up inadvertently supporting, other players who do not have an interest in India's rise, who can be very competitive with us, and who, through their own behavior, often actually damage us. So it's very, we've got to walk this with a great deal of skill and with a great deal of, I would say, sensitivity. Sometimes you lean a little bit this way, sometimes you lean a little bit that way. But if I were today to look at the big economic issues, what the COVID, for example, has taught us, that we are today our level of manufacturing is way below what it should be for an economy of our size and our stage of development. Now, it has serious national security implications. When COVID started, as one of the 5 ministers who was in a group charged by the PM with dealing with COVID, we looked at the capacity of the country. It was frightening. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, we have tried to plug that gap and really give a push in terms of health capacities. But if you look at other areas, I mean, when we, for example, had the problem, when we had this clash at Galwan, then we looked at, our exposure on the digital side. There were games and apps which were soaking up really, tens, if not hundreds of millions of people's data. So we, today, how do we, prepare? How do we find the right combination of players for a particular objective? So what it does is it creates a very differentiated landscape. You can have the Quad, but you can have the Shanghai Cooperation. Okay. So you can have the IMEC, you can have the Chennai Vladivostok, you can have the North-South Transport Corridor with Russia and Iran. So I would argue that in a world where you have different combinations, different issues, different partnerships, the country which is able to derive the most is by participating in the most, but not at the cost of your core interests. I mean, you have to be very clear. You don't join just because it is there. There are some things you stay away from. I mean, we stayed away from Belt and Road because Belt and Road violated our sovereignty. So you've got to apply your mind, pick and choose, decide where you want to be in, where you want to be out, who you work with, who you don't want to work with, on which issue you want to work with. That's today become really the foreign policy exercise. On leading from that to the follow-up question in a way, that we want an order, but are we really capable of constructing something beyond a Western liberal order? My sense is it is coming. It is coming today because a lot of countries are not comfortable with the manner in which the liberal Western order itself has evolved. Because the liberal Western order very often seeks to impose cultural values, their cultural values. It is extremely intrusive. It is often very judgmental. And there are countries who today really say, I don't need to take that from this particular order. So I would say, in a way, the ideological evolution of the Western order actually imposes certain, it creates antibodies, okay? It creates certain limits about its own acceptance and its own universality. And I cannot tell you what would be an alternative order. I think there'll be a long twilight zone where countries would contest. But I want you to think of something, a number which I read, which made a very deep impression on me. To some of the students in the room, I would say, when you are about my age, the GDP of India, according to Goldman Sachs, would be 52.5 trillion. Think about it. So when one of you is sitting here at that time, you will be representing a different India, you will be thinking a different India, you will be living a different India. So now, such an India surely is not going to function on the rules and norms and suggestions which were invented by other people. It will want its say. It will want its influence. And we won't be the only one. There'll be others also. So in a way today the challenge for us is having, essentially we have from 1947 slowly kind of, pulled ourselves up in a construct which was in a world which was invented by other people. We have reached a certain point. you know, the last 10 years have been very solid progress for us. But that becomes a foundation, certainly, to contemplate the next 25. And in the next 25, we'll have to think through our own solutions, our own ideas, in a way, our own ambitions. There will be differences with, you know, with many of the established powers. I mean, even your best friends sometimes don't like you rising too fast. So these will be the realities with which we will have to deal. But it is something which awaits us. It's certainly, as I said to the students, I mean, if you look at pretty much any growth projection of India of the next 50 years, these are very powerful incentives for us to work very hard to make the right choices and, you know, to ensure that the trajectory remains solid. The question about diplomats, I get it very often. So I give a sort of a yes and no answer there. You know, first of all, different diplomatic services, different countries count their diplomats in very different ways. You know, we tend to, so when people look at how many Indian diplomats are there, they actually pick a figure of a certain category of people who pass a UPSC exam, get 3 initials after the name on that, and then say, okay, that's the aggregate of what they are. If you actually look at the number of people in embassies, the number is very much more than that. The number is because there are other streams which join the embassies, including from the Ministry of External Affairs. There are streams outside the foreign ministry which join the embassies. And in fact, different countries have different models of working. You know, in many cases, we tend to rely on local people much more. But so the answer is, would you need more diplomats? Would you seek more diplomats? Absolutely. And in fact, we've just got an increase from the government of roughly about 20% expansion in our strength. But at the same time, I ask you to think of the counter question. If the numbers are as small as you all think it is, why are we doing as well as we are doing? Think about it.
With your indulgence, sir, if I can just take a round of final faculty questions and with the permission of the Vice Chancellor. So final questions? Yes? Mr. Ketkar, you are not part of the faculty, but I still...
I'm not asking as a journalist and definitely not to the Minister of External Affairs. I'm a student of, I've been a student of SIS and I'm asking to author. Sir, in SIS we have learned about, from Morgenthau to Walsh to, Kissinger's. And when I see and I read your writings as an author from the India way to why Bharat matters, you bring in a totally different perspective when you are bringing Mahabharata or Ramayana or Indian perspective. One, how do you see that we can bring in this fresh Indian perspective and theorization while teaching, learning in School of International Studies? And two, how far this helps you? Because you have also trained in the same School of International Studies that we have studied. But where was that turning point where you felt that, it is Mahabharata and Ramayana that can give us a different perspective?
After this question is answered,
I know we have many more questions, but all good things have to be. Okay, sorry, sir.
Hang on a minute. I don't want to correct you, but I was just checking with my colleagues. I have a little bit of time, so let me take a round of questions. Yeah. So don't worry, we can sit here and conduct it, so you can open up the floor. I'd be happy to take you.
And then Manish. And I'm partial to SIS, I'm very sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar, for clarifying a lot of those things. I wish that you will have much more interaction with our SIS faculty and the students, because that is our SOD every. Now, one thing which I'd like to ask you, of course, you spoke very well about the, our India's commitment to international law and compliance with international law. That is exactly where a lot of our things we have been doing with the international court of justice. But one thing which I thought I really wonder is, although we have been eyeing for the permanent seat in the Security Council, with veto, without veto, we don't know, and the time will tell. But why do we feel hesitant? Because you have to look at the entire spectrum of how the United Nations is working or not working. But one of the organs of United Nations which is lying dormant is the United Nations Trusteeship Council, and which now it's on the agenda. The Secretary General of the United Nations has put as a part of his common agenda. The Summit of the Future is probably going to deal with it. Why not we make a policy statement? And there is a proposal already pending with the Prime Minister of India. Legal opinion was also taken. Why not? Because that will probably give much more legitimacy about our claim to have a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. And there is no cost. You don't make a de novo new entity. There is no cost to just you need to open the Trusteeship Council hall and change the rules of the business, and it can be given a new mandate, what is called the repurposed Trusteeship Council. I have given a proposal to Amitabh, maybe he can pass it on. Thank you.
Dr. Dabare.
Thanks, Mr. Mat. I have a very small question. 2019, sir, you gave an address on dogmas of Delhi. So, after all these years, after 5 years, which of them have been buried happily and which remain to be sent to the grave? Thank you.
The first question about using Mahabharat and Ramayana, it's not something which is a new thought. So please be assured, it's a very non-political approach that I bring to international relations. How it actually started, I think most people, you read about it even when you were relatively young. And I grew up in a household where there were very active and very provocative discussions. So, my house was like a variant of JNU in a way, where you are continuously challenged, even amongst the family. And the idea of thinking of Mahabharata itself as a very, very complex, as a world in itself, which had its complexities, which had its, all the what we learnt in political science, let us say balance of power, hedging, it was something you started picking up then, and I still remember when I was still, in fact, a student in JNU, my father asking me to sit down and plot on a map of India, who lined up, and it's a very interesting exercise, I encourage you all to do it as well. You take a look who was on which side, of the war. And you will actually get a very elaborate balance of power map of India. Because in many cases, the choices which were made were less ethical choices. They were partly, and the familial linkages were very common. These were kingdoms which made their choices based on, who's my neighbor, and then who's my neighbor's neighbor, and that's kind of the logic which would apply. In fact, there is a debate even in Mahabharata when Krishna is discussing how to do regime change in Magadha with Jarasandha. They are actually discussing which are the other kingdoms which would then be destabilized if you remove the fulcrum power, if you bring about regime change Now, Ramayana was less, I would say, less of a political science friendly saga, but it has very powerful aspects to it. So, so in many ways, I'm now indulging myself in thoughts which I have nursed for many, many years. And, certainly, for me, because, I'm also an accidental political science student. Somebody asked me about my anecdotes of JNU. If I were to write my JNU, I would title it Accidental Student, because I was a student in an institution next door called the IIT. I wasn't enjoying myself there. and fortunately JNU had a strike. So admissions that year were delayed in JNU. So although I was a student in IIT, it still gave me a chance to apply to JNU and to actually join JNU. But you know, as someone who got into this domain actually out of interest, and then kept it, then it became for me a profession. But it wasn't like going to office. I enjoyed being a foreign service officer. I enjoyed writing and reading and speaking about you know, world politics and world culture and world history. So I think it flowed as a kind of a continuum from all of that into how it's become. But I feel very strongly about it because you know, again, many of us have read these accounts where people say, you know, India doesn't have a strategic culture. There's no definitive book in India written about this. So you don't, you know, if you don't have a Morgenthau and you don't have a Kenneth Walsh and you don't have a Machiavelli, and depending on who you pick. Now, in many cases we do. It's just we ourselves don't speak about it. In some cases, if we don't, we need to make an effort and create them. You know. So I'm very much, I mean, if I were to think of a project ahead in my life, it would actually be to try to get together a kind of an Indian strategic thought distillation, that I can go out to the world and say, you know, listen, you want to know what is strategic thinking in India? Here is this book. You know, it's clearly something beyond my individual capacity, but it is something which interests me very, very deeply, and I would certainly hope, you know, that I can try and do something about it. On the United Nations, look, there's no backdoor entry. If we want reform of the United Nations, you can't reform a house without reforming the, you know, the core of that building. So we have to in a sense to confront the main problem, and the main problem is to get the momentum to actually get serious conversations going. Now, interestingly, because, you know, I know it since I directly, you know, supervise that particular process. There's actually been some more movement that for the first time the UN is hearing from different countries what are the models of reform which they would prefer. So there's a presentation right now. We had the two co-chairs of the intergovernmental negotiations in India recently. They also spoke here. So I'm very convinced, you know, I'm not living in a fantasy world. I do believe that, you know, the tailwind of history of it's with us, that there is a momentum in the world, that we were, you know, even 20 years ago when this whole thing started, we were not seen as the obvious candidate. I mean, today, if you ask most countries in the world, so tell me who's missing, I guarantee you the vast majority will think of us. So, you know, we are gaining ground. It is taking place. It won't be easy. But I don't think there are other routes which will help us. I think we have to, in a way, get the core membership to accept that. And it's not like Security Council has never been expanded. There's been one expansion of non-permanent members. So we'll have to keep plugging away at it. On which dogmas have been buried. Well, one dogma which I found very interesting in 2014 was people told me Modi didn't know anything about foreign policy. I think that's buried very, very deep. I mean, if you look at these 10 years, you actually, and to me, frankly, it was also a revelation, you know, how much, you know, a person's travel, personal interest, you know, and in a way, I would say, how experiences are transferred from one domain to another. But there are, you know, there are issues. I still think there's the tendency that we are very risk averse even now. So if we progress on any relationship, it's not always applauded. People say, no, maybe we're going too fast. Maybe we shouldn't be tying ourselves up to somebody else so deeply. That's a kind of a risk aversion which keeps popping up. There's also a natural inclination to hedge. Now, hedging is good if you think it through, and for a hedging you must have a baseline and then you must do a hedge. You can't do hedges completely without any roots on the ground at all. Hedging does not mean not having positions on any issue. It means having a position and then kind of nuancing on it or de-risking on it. But there will be issues, I think, where we'll have to have clarity, on how we go. And certainly, I would say, for me, when I look back from that lecture to where we are today, when I delivered that lecture, there was still, people were quite uncertain. For example, how would Quad really develop? Because there is, our history with America is a difficult history, and not all of us have that ability to put that history behind and say, okay, let me, they've changed, we have changed, let's find ways of moving forward. Or I think there was the appreciation of what we were doing in the Gulf. There was a very kind of lazy effort to say, well, our politics has taken this direction and therefore will be very difficult to work with those countries. In fact, it has proven to be exactly the opposite. So I would say today we are at least in that stage where as a polity, as a society, as a government, today India does look at new ideas. It does take risks. It does take new initiatives. It creates new relationships. I mean, that has been very much the story of the last decade. So I would say many dogmas have been put to rest, but many remain, still have residual life.
Good evening. May I request the Honorable Vice Chancellor of JNU to felicitate the Honorable Minister with a shawl and the JNU memento.
Yes, maybe we are following your footsteps.
Yes, I'll just come to that.
So this is for the JNU representing the green credit. We are
I would like to also make an announcement on behalf of the Chairperson Alumni Affairs, Dr. Jagannathan. They are going to honor our distinguished alumnus, Dr. Jay Shankar, with a lifetime membership card. I would request the Honorable Vice Chancellor, the Patron of Alumni Affairs, to do the honors.
You can come and where is Jagannath? Yeah, Jagannath, why don't you tell?
We will remain seated.
Yeah, your rights with as well as JNU's rights.
So, May I do the formal honors, sir, to thank you. On behalf of the School of International Studies, I am pleased to express a deep appreciation for the Honorable Minister who agreed to deliver the inaugural address. It is a magnanimous gesture, sir. Your address, especially the 10 propositions, they were laden with ideas which would ignite the minds of the scholars to incorporate new topical dimensions in their research. The incubation of the idea to have Dr. Jaishankar inaugurate the Kunzru Memorial Lecture series came from the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Pandit, and it worked. I appreciate the tremendous support from the Dean SIS. To all members of the diplomatic corps, I express sincere gratitude. The presence of the esteemed members from the think tanks and the media has added value as we seek their support in disseminating the ideas and ethos behind Kunzru Memorial Lectures. I value the presence of my colleagues because this event is an outcome of the collaborative effort of SIS fraternity. I feel privileged to have been assigned the onerous task of bringing together the brilliant area-specific thoughts in the arena of international affairs that SIS represents. The officers of the MEA who have been coordinating the finer details of the Honorable Minister's address, they need special mention. The security apparatus of the government and the JNU need to be acknowledged. Having all the guests I would have missed naming was an honor. Finally, the School of International Studies is very fortunate to have Team Kunzru, a group of spectacular student volunteers working diligently to ensure all details have been executed as planned. And of course, the JNU administration, the engineering wing, and the PRO office, they must be thanked profusely for their logistical support for this event. Thank you, sir. All of us will remain seated till the dignitary leaves. Can we just have the aisle clear, please? And thank you very much. Appreciate.